it's all these different perspectives, and the truth is somewhere in the margins.
Heathcliff over Rochester.
Oh,
Heathcliff
yes.
over Darcy.
Oh, yeah, Heathcliff.
Heathcliff forever. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah MacLean. I'm the author of the upcoming These Summer Storms, and I'm so excited to be here with Layne Fargo, author of The Favorites, a delicious, big, epic story about Olympic figure skaters who fall in love or who have a lot of drama around love.
They have a lot of feelings.
Big feelings. That's what I love. But it's also a retelling of Wuthering Heights. We're going to get into that. Mm-hmm. And just a really big, dramatic, feeling-filled book, which is all I want in books these days. So welcome, Layne.
Thank you so much for being here with me today. I'm excited to chat.
I know. So let's get right into The Favorites, which is a sort of long-term epic. It covers many, many years of a figure skating duo and their trials. Could you talk a little bit about how you came to this?
Yeah, so I was writing 2 different books, and neither of them was working. I don't know if you've ever had this experience.
I've never experienced this. They just pour right out of me.
Sure, yeah, it's so easy. So one was sort of a modern Gothic romance, and then one was a thriller about ice dancers. And neither one was working, and I decided to reread Wuthering Heights, which I loved as a teenager but hadn't read since high school. Mm-hmm. I think I was trying to get inspiration for the Gothic one. I was in a bad place. It was during the pandemic also, I should say.
So we were all in a bad place.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I reread Wuthering Heights, and I had this idea of like, what if it was like Wuthering Heights meets figure skating? And then I thought I completely lost it. So I went to because this was December 2021, like we had all just like we were out of our minds. So I talked to one of my critique partners and told her this concept, and she was really into it and assured me that it was not a crazy idea and that I should pursue it. Even then, I tried to talk myself out of it for a while. Like, I have all these notes from that time where I'm like, well, I'm not writing this book, but if I was to write it, maybe it would be like this. And I kind of slowly, like, just couldn't walk away from it. And it turned into The Favorites.
So I want to talk Wuthering Heights, but let's start with figure skating, because I feel like it's one of those things that there are people who adore figure skating all the time, follow it constantly. There are people who love the Olympics and come to it every 4 years and, all of a sudden want to be a part of figure skating and fall for it then. Are you somebody who's just loved figure skating your whole life?
Yeah, I'm someone who's loved the Olympics my whole life.
Okay.
And so I am not a sports fan except when the Olympics are on.
Same.
And then I'm obsessed. I love every sport. I'm like an expert.
I'm never more of an American than when the Olympics are on. Like, suddenly I feel very American.
Yeah, very patriotic, just cheering for everything, watching like the weirdest sports I've never heard of.
Yeah.
But skating was always my favorite one to watch. And I grew up like in the era of the Tanya Harding, Nancy Kerrigan scandal.
Same.
And the scoring scandal at 2002 Salt Lake with the Russian team and the Canadian team. I mean, so many good scandals back in the day. But I was more of a casual Olympics-only fan before deciding to write this book. And then I had to do a lot of research on the kind of technical aspects of it.
How did you do that?
In many very, very nerdy ways. So I went back through the archive of the U.S. Figure Skating magazine. They have it all archived, like every issue back till like the 80s, even before that, I think, scanned so you can read them. I'm probably the only one who has bothered to do that. I'm not sure. But that was really helpful. It's like interviews with skaters and even the like cheesy ads and stuff from back in the day. Yeah. I read a lot of memoirs by skaters and other Olympic athletes. I watched a lot of YouTube videos and just tried to learn as much about the world as I could, because I think I like all that kind of technical detail. I think it's fun to weave that into a book. Like, I mean, you don't want to info dump, obviously, but to really give someone a glimpse into a world that they might not be familiar with. And so I wanted to make it as real as possible. And I've had a couple actual skaters read it and tell me I got it really right, which was such a relief. I was like, there must be something I missed.
When that happens. It's interesting because I also think the other way that this book feels so of a time and real and and really realistic is it's written, the structure of the book is both the protagonist, Kat, are, you know, the female half, the woman half of the skating team is the main character, the protagonist. But there's so much interstitial stuff in here. There's a documentary going on that tells the story of the chaotic story of Heath and Kat. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about building that structure, about how you used these transcripts from the documentary to really move the story along. There's so much that's built into that, and the voices of all those extra characters in there.
That was always a part of it. It took me a while to get the balance right so that
you knew from the beginning.
Yeah, I did. I love, again, like the cheesy, scandalous sports documentaries or the video packages during the Olympics where it's like you've never heard of this person and then you watch this like 3 to 5 minute video about them and now you would die for them and you're just rooting for them so hard. So I wanted to capture that and also to show a lot of different perspectives on the central couple, Kat and Heath, because like we hear Kat's side of the story, but she thinks a lot of things that she did are justified that we may or may not agree with. And similarly, in the original Wuthering Heights, we're not hearing from Kathy and Heathcliff. We're hearing the story filtered through other characters. Right. So I wanted to have that feel of it's all these different perspectives and the truth is somewhere in the margins and we can kind of make up our minds for ourselves. And it also just let me have a lot of fun, snarky lines and develop these characters that had like totally different voices from each other. I have a like theater and playwriting background, so it was really fun to write pure dialogue.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. It feels that way. It's just such a fun read. And one of the things that I did want to talk about was the audiobook.
Oh, yeah.
Because it has this vast cast and some people that people will know.
Yes. So there is a character in the book who's my Nellie Dean character from like that character from Wuthering Heights. In my book, Nellie Dean is a guy and he's a gay skater turned gossip blogger who's very snarky and mean, but has other like hidden layers too, I would say. And I based him pretty obviously on Johnny Weir, the former figure skater who's now a commentator and wears such fabulous over-the-top outfits and is just like everyone knows who he is. So when the audiobook producer reached out to me about casting, I basically was like, I don't think this is possible, but my delusional author dream is that Johnny plays Ellis Dean. And she's like, oh, yeah, I could see. Yeah, we'll try and find someone who sounds like him. And I was like, great, that's all I wanted. And then a few days later, she emailed me and was like, you know what, let's just ask. He can just say no. Like, we'll just ask. Let's shoot our shot. And again, I wasn't expecting anything. I just thought it was so cool that maybe he would know that the book existed.
Yeah.
Like, that was all I really wanted. But he said yes, and he played the character. And I haven't had a chance to listen to too much of the audiobook yet, but I've heard rave reviews that he's just hilarious. And I do keep, like, every few days, I will remember some line that character has and be like, I made Olympian Johnny Weir say what? Yeah. So,
well, I'm sure he had a great time.
I hope so.
You were also in the audiobook.
Yeah, I read the acknowledgments and the dedication, which was really fun because this book was such a process. Like, it took me a really long time to write and to just I was kind of in a dark, confused place as a writer. Again, pandemic era.
We're all.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they're like by far my longest acknowledgments. I just had so many people to shout out because it was such a long process and so many people supported me through it.
Well, and when you're doing something that's so completely different and requires so much research, of course. Well, let's talk about that, the sort of shift, because you're a thriller writer, and that is not to say that there aren't like some wonderful twists and turns through this book and a real kind of like question mark through the whole thing. But I think a lot, obviously, as a genre writer myself, who's changing lanes a little bit, I'm thinking so much about writers who are making those shifts from one genre to another or an evolution in the way that they write. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about like how thriller writing teed you up for something that I would say is more of a romance.
I think I just never know what genre I'm writing ever. Like my debut novel was about kind of backstage drama at this small Chicago theater company, and it's very dark and twisted, but more about like interpersonal dynamics and manipulation and all of that kind of stuff. And when I wrote it, I had no idea what genre it was, and at the time psychological thrillers were really hot. So when I went to sell it, my agent and editors, they were like, "Oh, it's a psychological thriller." And I was like, "Okay, I guess it is." Well, some readers disagree.
Yeah.
So I wrote that one, and then my second book, I was like, "Okay, I'm a thriller writer. I'm going to write a thriller." So I wrote a book that was about a serial killer and had a lot of like police investigation kind of stuff, and did not like that. I like that aspect of it. I really liked the character and the like relationship side of it and kind of the interpersonal drama, but the real thriller stuff, I had so much, like it was just like pulling teeth for me. It wasn't fun. So and then when I was trying to write a third book after that, it just started to feel constricting. Like I have so much respect and like awe, quite frankly, of people who can write within those genre conventions and keep making it fresh and have like a new twist every time and surprise the reader, like while staying within the confines of like what the genre fans expect. But to me, it just felt constricting, and I kind of wanted to rebel against it for a while. And I don't know, I had to do a lot of soul searching to figure out like what I actually wanted to focus on. And this book, I felt like I really hit it, where it's the psychological stuff, the interpersonal dynamics, the research and world building, and kind of getting a glimpse at this world that people might not be familiar with, the sort of era spanning, all of that stuff. But I still am not 100% sure what genre this book is, honestly. Like it has a romance element, but I didn't intend it to be a romance exactly, and there's definitely like some things in there that I know are not things you do in a romance genre book. Like I love romance and I read a lot of it, and there are just certain elements, I don't want to give spoilers, but like that I would never have done if I was writing a true romance.
Right. Well, I think the genre is great, and that's all you need to tell people.
Thank you.
So tell me a little bit about process, because I know that it's different for all of us. And also you were writing it during the pandemic, so it was probably very different from your other books. But
yeah,
what's your writing process like?
Chaos.
Same. Yes.
Good. Okay. Every once in a while I say that.
I'm always like, don't do it my way.
This book, I mean, I threw out, it's long. It's longer than my other books, and I threw out almost a full book's worth of extra material. I just was like free writing, experimenting with things. For a while, because most of the story is told through Kat, like just basically telling her story to the reader, I did dictation. Like I would just talk into my phone as Kat, which I am not an actor. Like it was not for anyone else to hear.
And you've never done that before. That's never been a way that you've found a character.
No, but it just was really helpful. I would just I'd like pace around my office and just talk, and then run it through a transcription software and pull out the lines. Or
so did you have a sense, I mean, having written books before that have a kind of thriller element or sort of a mystery element, did you have a sense of what you were writing toward, or did it really, what came first, the kind of ending or the characters, or you know, where were you going? We should say it's a story about Olympic skaters kind of and their constant quest for gold.
And we know from the opening that something happened at their final Olympic Games 10 years ago that was very tragic and dramatic, and we don't know what it is.
So now in my process, I would have written that opening and been like, well, I don't know. And then written 100,000 words to get there. But you knew.
I knew some of it. It changed.
Well, it feels like coming from Nancy Kerrigan, Tanya Harding, the Russian score situation. The Olympic skating sort of comes with all of these obvious worries.
Yeah. I mean, there's just all sorts of things that can go wrong, and it's this sport where like you work for your whole life, and then especially for like 4 years training for the Olympics, and then it all hinges on these few minutes on the ice, which is very slippery, and anything can go wrong, and people's dreams can just die in like a second.
And these are young. I mean, I think one of the things that you really dig into here is these are young people who have had nothing but this as their goal forever. So it can feel like there is nothing worse ever in the world, in the history of the world, than losing those few points that keep you off the medal stand.
Yeah, it's their whole life. Like, it's all they've known. Most of the people they hang out with, because they're training all the time, like, that's also their goal, and they can't all get what they want.
Yeah.
But the ending, I went through a couple different endings, some that were much more like Wuthering Heights tragic, some that were a little more thrillery, like vengeance and murder. And then I was partway through drafting, and I went to see the Stars on Ice tour, which was unbelievably my first time seeing skating live. Like, I'd watched it on TV so much and watched all these videos, but it was my first time seeing it live. And it was just, like, the joy that these skaters had was so palpable. And it was something I was thinking a lot about as a writer. Like, why do we do this? Like, it's really hard. Are we going to torture ourselves a lot? And this industry is really difficult. But at the end of the day, we have to really love it and find some joy in it, or it's not worth all of the struggle. So I turned to my partner at intermission and, like, probably with like a crazed look in my eyes, and was like, there has to be joy. There has to be like a happy ending. There has to be, that sense of like, why are they doing this? It's not just about the gold medal. Like, they have to find joy in the process too. And so that changed the whole direction of the book and my understanding of myself as a writer, honestly. Like, it was like a huge moment for me.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I think you've hit on, you said earlier, you don't know, what genre it falls into, but like joy really is where romance lives, right? And you had been writing things that were not in that space.
Yeah, and it felt like kind of dark and depressing in a way that I just couldn't stomach anymore during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I want to feel happy. I want to feel, and like, obviously a lot of drama and bad stuff happens in this book too, but ultimately it's fun. It felt fun to me to write.
And that drama is how you get joy, right? Like, you have to feel all the feelings.
All the feelings.
And you definitely do here. And let's talk about how Wuthering Heights sort of found its way here, because it feels like Wuthering Heights, and then it feels like just Wuthering Heights, turned kind of 45 degrees.
I was kind of like, what if Kathy and Heathcliff lived in the modern day and like could go to therapy? Like, what
if the poor Bronte sisters would have really lost out if that had been the case.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking, because at one point early on in the process, I was trying to do a dual timeline kind of thing where it was like the old generation, the new generation, like in Wuthering Heights. And then I was like, no, I really want them to work it out in their way.
Yeah.
Instead of it being like their children or like the next generation that does it. I want to see them come to terms with some of these issues. But my love of Wuthering Heights it's just, like, I fell in love with it as a teenage girl. I think that's the perfect time to read it.
It's the only time.
It's the only time.
Read it. If you read it as a grown-up, we don't recommend reading Wuthering Heights as a grown-up.
No, because you're just like, what is wrong with these people?
There is no falling in love with Heathcliff as a grown-up.
No, but as a teenager, you're just like, you feel things so strongly.
Yeah.
And it is like, these characters have these emotions that are like forces of nature. Like, it is just, it's a lot.
Yes.
But you understand it as a teenager, and that was really fun to tap into.
So you were Heathcliff over everyone else. Heathcliff over Rochester.
Oh,
Heathcliff
yes.
over Darcy.
Oh, yeah, Heathcliff.
Heathcliff forever.
Forever.
It's good to know. I feel like that's what this is like an establishing question for me, for everyone in the whole world. Like, which of these three?
Because you have to choose.
You must choose.
You must choose. Wait, which one do you choose?
Well, it's interesting because I have like a whole theory. I definitely do not choose Rochester because absolutely not, no. Mm-hmm. I'm not a Rochester apologist.
Thank you.
I mean, I do love a Darcy because, there's something about a very sort of tense man who has never felt a feeling.
Yeah.
And then feels a feeling and wrecks everything.
And is terrified and runs away. Yeah.
But there is also the sort of Heathcliff of it all on the moors, feeling all the feelings. Mm-hmm. Except one of them is who you marry and the other one is who you...
Yeah, sure.
We'll keep it clean. But.
Heathcliff, not so much a good husband, and I did try.
But like one night with Heathcliff.
Sure.
A+.
Yeah, especially Tom Hardy Heathcliff, I think.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Now you're singing my song.
Like, there's something about a man who's so straightforward. Like, I've seen people talking about Heath, my Heathcliff character in this book, that they're like, well, his whole personality is just that he loves cat. And I'm like, yes.
Accurate.
That's correct. It was interesting my partner is a therapist, and he helped me kind of get into these poor babies, they have so much childhood trauma, and they're really trauma bonded.
That's really real.
Yeah.
And you layer it on, too. It's not just that they are ice skaters and, forced into this world.
Yeah.
There's a lot of trauma.
There's a lot of trauma. I mean, he's an orphan. Her mother died young, and then her father dies.
She has this terrible brother.
Her terrible abusive brother. Yeah, so skating is really an escape for them, and they see it as their way out of this terrible situation.
We're going to come back, but this is also making me think of another question, an important question, which is, are you a Cutting Edge fan?
I didn't see Cutting Edge until I was working on this book. I'm ashamed to say, but I'm a fan now. I know. I'm very ashamed.
But it's great.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So go on. I'm sorry. I took you away from classics and brought you to modern classics.
This is a modern classic.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah, I watched all the skating movies when I was working on this. I watched Ice Castles. That is messed up. I was like, I don't know about this. But I kind of went back into the archives because these are all the things I knew people would be comparing it to. A lot of people are really into that movie Ice Princess as well. I feel like that's younger people than us.
I've missed all of these.
Yeah.
I watched The Cutting Edge. That became the gold standard and nothing ever.
Fair enough. Yeah.
That was just it. Anyway, back to Wuthering Heights. Were there moments in Wuthering Heights that you were like, that beat has to be here?
I mean, certainly the whole, it would degrade me to marry Heathcliff, and that whole, I won't say how that plays out in my book, but you gotta have that. That's key. I think it was a lot about just the strength of the emotions and their connection and the atmosphere and sort of the nature aspect of it. So another thing that I incorporated into this book that was sort of a holdover from that Gothic book I was trying to write that failed miserably, was during the pandemic, I would go for these long walks in parks by Lake Michigan near where I live in Chicago. And it was just this, you're near the city, but it feels like this wild landscape. It's all these rocks and the waves crashing. And it just felt like I imagined the moors to feel, just this sort of wild nature. And that was really inspiring to me. So I tried to incorporate that atmosphere into their home, which is on the shores of Lake Michigan, Kat's childhood home.
And also your home, or where you're in Chicago. So how much of Chicago got into this?
As much as I could possibly. My very first book was set in Chicago, and since then I've been writing about other places mostly, and this one takes place across the world, really.
Obviously.
And they're in Los Angeles for a lot of the book, various places, but I just love Chicago so much, and so I tried to put as much of it in there as I could.
In one of your bios, I was reading about you, and something you said about, and correct me if I get it wrong, but it was, you're really fascinated by women's rights and women's wrongs.
Yes.
And I think there's something really powerful about Kat, and it seems like you've been exploring this over all of your books. This kind of what in romance people refer to as an unlikable heroine, despite me absolutely loathing that term. But Kat is a very complex heroine with a lot of drive and focus. And there are definitely moments in this book where she makes choices that readers are going to say, some readers will say oh, well, that feels very cold and ruthless. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you build heroines who have this kind of big, nuanced life, like so many of us. do you set out to write a heroine who has that kind of complexity or who might have a sort of edge, or does it come naturally?
It comes naturally, honestly. So I had a podcast for several years with 2 other authors called Unlikable Female Characters, where we were kind of like reclaiming this term.
Yeah, it's terrible.
It's terrible, but I was like, yeah, we're unlikable. Like, we're going to own it. And that's just the sort of character that I'm drawn to in other books and movies, whatever, is a woman who knows what she wants and goes after it. And
because Kat makes a lot of choices that are
like
overtly turning her back to what we might call softness.
Yeah, softness and sort of the heteropatriarchal narrative of what you're supposed to do with your life. Like, she doesn't really care about getting married. She doesn't want to be a mother. And those are all things that I'm very much taking from my own life and just wanting to explore it in books, because I feel like I don't see characters like that enough. Or like, there are plenty of them. I'm not like, I didn't reinvent the wheel here, but I always want to see more of women pushing back against those narratives while still like wanting love and connection in her life. Like, she really does love Heath. She has important friendships, but she is very ruthlessly focused on her goals. And if she has to choose between her ambition and these romantic or personal connections, like, that's she's going to choose ambition every time.
Yeah. So I wonder if, I know that we are, just to sort of wrap up, could you talk a little bit about what the book taught you? Because I always feel like that's a question. That's a thing that every book teaches you something.
Mm-hmm. This book taught me so much. I really, through the process of writing it, was rethinking who I wanted to be as a writer, what I thought success could look like. I went through a period of being very just anxious about like writing a book that people would like, or trying to please other people, right? Like, being very aware of that. And then I finally was just like, no, I'm going to write exactly what I want. It's going to be for me. I didn't even share it with my agent or anybody until it was pretty much done. And I found joy in the process. Like, I just enjoyed writing this book, finding all the little research tidbits, like playing around with these characters, and I just enjoyed myself so much. And like, I hope people can feel that in the book, like how much pleasure I took in writing it and how much fun it was. And what's been cool is seeing the response to it. Like, it's been my most successful book already, and like, people have really responded to it, but I wasn't thinking about that so much when I was writing. I was thinking about like my own joy and taking joy in that day-to-day process instead of thinking about the end result.
I love that. I love that it came out of the pandemic too. I feel like so many really terrific books are coming out of that darkness. Yeah,
because we all had so much time to sit and think about things, and are kind of forced to. And I started going to therapy during the pandemic regularly. I started taking antidepressants. I made a lot of changes that improved my mental health and kind of got me to the point that I could take that much joy in it and not just be anxious all the time. And like, I didn't even realize how anxious I was until I got my brain chemistry kind of tweaked.
Sure. Well, I'm glad that happened. What's next?
I am working on my second book for Random House. It was a 2-book deal with this one, and it's, again, going to be about very complex, ambitious women. This one takes place around a Broadway musical. So
you're going back to your roots.
Yes, going back to my roots. And I've been in New York a lot over the past year, seeing various shows and kind of gathering my thoughts about it. But it's going to show like an original production of a musical and then a revival that's happening in the present day. And
so 2 timelines.
Yeah, kind of bouncing back and forth. And I'm not very far in it yet, but I'm really excited about it.
That's great.
And so you have a book coming out from Valentine, right, this summer?
I do. These Summer Storms is my first contemporary. So talk about sort of trying something totally new and really exploring and being a little nervous about the whole thing. Mm-hmm. I've written 19 historical romances, and this is a commercial. It's just a commercial novel, right? It's not. I keep telling people, it's not really romance, though there is a big romance that runs through it. But for me, it really felt like something completely new because it's not. The main focus isn't the romance, but it's set in Rhode Island where I grew up, and contemporary, and It comes out in July.
Did you find it easier to write contemporary than historical, or was it harder?
It was so much harder. And I have to be honest, for a long time I was like, well, I have to do all this research, and, how hard could it be to write your own world? And it is incredibly difficult. And, a really, I think because I basically put them on an island so that I could get rid of cell phones, so that I could remove the internet from the issue. And it was really, but honestly, it was really difficult in the sense that it's just that's not the muscle I've used for however many years.
And it's like in a familiar world, it's almost like you don't know what to emphasize,
Yeah,
right?
and also I've wrote about the story. It's a dysfunctional family come home after their billionaire father's death to a private island off the coast of Rhode Island, and only to discover that he's left them an inheritance game. So it's basically like Succession, but make it sexy. And what's really interesting is when you write in historical about a dysfunctional family, say, no one in your life thinks that you're writing about your own family. When you write it in contemporary, suddenly your family is like, am I this character? So I've done a lot of I need to sort of blow up that front, in the very first page of the book, it says the characters within are completely fictional and not based on anybody in real life. I need to, blow that up and stick it on my family's copies.
That seems like a good idea. Make them like special dust jackets.
Yeah,
say that.
Exactly. But secretly, they're all about my family, so...
I was going to say, it's just as easy to write about them in a historical novel.
Yeah, but nobody sees it in historicals.
Good to know.
They don't know I've already written about them in historicals. So yeah, that comes out in July. So
excited to read it.
Thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you. This was wonderful. It's so great to chat with you.